You know what I mean? And that's a key part of work-life balance, because if your work life is sucking the life out of you, like that's affecting your home life, right? That's affecting your
Yeah.
personal life. And if you're working with people that you love working with, you love collaborating with, you love creating with, it doesn't matter what field you're in.
Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Sheamus McGovern. Sheamus is the founder of the Open Data Science Conference, otherwise known as ODSC, one of the world's leading successful AI conferences. ODSC runs numerous virtual and in-person data science conferences around the globe. Sheamus also founded AI Plus Training, which is dedicated to bridging the AI talent gap with on-demand live training programs. He's a technologist with over 25 years of experience in software, data engineering, and AI, and in our conversation, we dive into how Sheamus integrates project management into his life and how his passion for learning was multiplied when he first found conferences. I happen to be speaking at one of the ODSC events coming up, and I hope you'll join me. I'll be there in person. I'd love to meet all of you. I really enjoyed this conversation with Sheamus. He's fun, he's animated, and I think you will too. Sheamus, thank you so much for coming on the Ken's Nearest Neighbors podcast. So you're obviously behind some of the incredible conferences at ODSC. You've had such an interesting career. You also have a really excellent sounding accent. Your accent is probably one of my favorite sounding ones of all time. And I'm happy to have you on the show to tell your story, to have some people learn about your progress and what you've done in this space and how you've been able to build these incredible communities. So again, thank you so much for coming on.
Ken, awesome to be here. And, I can only reciprocate. You were on my show, so it's good to have you, good for me to be on yours.
Excellent. So excellent. I had a blast talking to you. We had a really good chat over LinkedIn Live, and I hope it's recorded somewhere. I'd love to be able to share that around as well. So perfect. For sure. So the first question that I always ask to sort of get people introduced to you and your story is, how did you first get interested in data? Was there a pivotal moment? Was it something that happened? Like you had this class and it just blew your mind, or was it a slow progression over time?
Yeah. It was a pivotal moment of frustration, I think is the best way of describing it. So my background is in finance and software engineering, and maybe we'll get into that a bit later. But I was part of a startup here in Boston. I just returned from London doing a capital markets startup in the bond markets, which sounds super boring, and it was super boring. But the crux of the matter was we were trying to mine all this information, what was going on in the stock market, going on in the bond markets. And, being a data engineer, knowing quite a bit about statistics and other stuff like that, I thought I had a good handle on it, and we're struggling certain pieces. So I went to a meetup in Boston, and after attending a ton of conferences, I was like, I couldn't believe, here I'm at a meetup, it's free. And it was, I think it was a startup was called Hopper. They were applying NLP to travel arrangements or, travel booking and stuff like that. So after the talk, I met with the speaker, and he gave me massive insights into how to use NLP to, model data and scrape it. And that's really where I kind of felt that I need to migrate from this idea of being a software engineer and into the realm of data science and machine learning, because this thing is incredibly powerful and such a different way of even thinking about projects than we're used to in software engineering. So that was pretty exciting, and that was a big moment. And then a whole chain of events happened from there, which we'll get into later. But I love that. That was the beginning of it.
There's something, I think that there is sort of a paradigm shift or a mindset shift when you're coming from a lot of other disciplines into data. So the first thing that I noticed, I had a lot of physicists that I work with or physicists that worked for me as data scientists. And from coming from physics, coming from a lot of other disciplines, there's a formulaic approach. There's a right answer. There's no estimation. Like, hey, we are trying to model what's happening in the world, and we do that with an equation. And to a certain extent, I think you do that with software engineering too. There's like a binary, a right or a wrong. And in data science, there's this idea where like we're working in shades of correctness. No model is 100% right. We're just trying to do better than what exists. And that idea of like that incremental improvement, as we've talked, that sort of pervades through your entire life. And I really like that. How do we do just a little bit better? How do we iterate on this and tinker and improve? And I'd love to hear where that mindset developed. Was that something that you got, earlier in your career when you were working in software even, or is that something that you've developed over time?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I think it's a discipline that comes with time, because if you're in the software engineering field or the engineering field in general, like you do adhere to certain, project management principles, but then you might use a methodology such as the agile methodology. So, starting, I think in the 90s, this whole idea of doing these quick sprints, quick turnarounds, instead of doing these monolith 3-month projects. Because when I started my career, you could be on a project for 3 or 6 months. That's incredibly boring, because you would spend the first month in doing system analysis, system requirements, and then you move into the build phase and then the deploy phase. Nowadays, things are much faster. You're very much focused on a 1 week or a 2 week sprint. And after a while, you start to, from doing that from a few years, you start to apply that to other aspects of your life, right? So you're used to understanding, how do I get quick wins, right? You can look at life that everything is whether it's your personal life or whether it's your career, everything is kind of a bit of an opportunity cost, right? So the whole concept of being able to work on something for a week or a day or an hour and deliver a meaningful result in a quick turnaround time is pretty powerful. And I think that's very true of whether it's coding on the job, learning on the job, or just training yourself. It's really kind of hard to say, okay, I'm going to become a programmer, which could take 5 years, or I'm going to become a data scientist. How do you break these problems down into smaller, manageable pieces? So it doesn't matter if you're tackling an engineering project, or you're an analyst or a business analyst, and you just want to, tackle a project. So that whole discipline of breaking things down and applying that discipline to it, I think has been massively powerful. I think a lot of people have gotten good use from that.
Incredible. And so I think that there's a really cool sort of gray area between project management in your work and project management in your life. I mean, you've described to me that you basically run your life with a project management framework. I wanted to talk about this later, but while we're on the topic, can you talk a little bit about what your personal project management philosophy? So what's your Seamus management philosophy?
Well, this is a bit like peeling the onion. What's the easiest way to think about this? So, I did study project management first and foremost because I was pretty fascinated about that, because, I knew to be successful, you had to build a good team. So how do you do that? And in project management, people think it's all about, getting stuff delivered on time, but projects can fail for a lot of reasons. They can fail because, let's say, you didn't bring it in on budget, right, for a work project. They can fail because, you didn't deliver the features you promised. They can fail because you didn't calculate all the risks. So project management, as they say, is essentially a study. It's a risk study, right? It's an exercise in risk. And like many things, you can extrapolate that into opportunity costs, right? So it doesn't matter from your work life or your personal life, everything you do has got an opportunity cost for it, right? If you decide to go and watch The Matrix Reloaded or Revolution, then you're giving up on some other movie you want to see, right? Every decision you make, if you go eat at one restaurant, you're excluding somebody else. So it doesn't matter if it's projects you're working on, your career, your personal life. I think understanding opportunity cost and putting a value on that is a great way of looking at your kind of work-life balance. Where do you want to put stuff? Where do you want to put time in? So I think, in short, that's where I think of it a lot. In terms of what's the cost of this to me? So it doesn't matter if I'm spending 5 minutes on something or 5 hours or 5 days. I am weighing it against the risks and the opportunity costs against something else I could be doing. I think that's a very important concept.
I agree. One of the reasons why I didn't pursue playing golf, something that I loved further, is that I realized there's an opportunity cost of me trying to play professionally over a period of time. My job opportunities that I had potential access to dramatically decreased the longer I played golf. The amount of learning that I could do, the amount of time that I could spend doing other things, learning and educating myself, went way down. Something I think is really important to sort of extrapolate on associated with that is when we talk about cost, how do you view cost? I mean, is it in dollars and cents? Is it in enjoyment? Is it in, fulfillment? What is your major KPI cost metric that you focus on and care most about?
Yeah, I will say as a quick aside, Ken, I bet you're still a better golfer than I am, despite putting that much time. And I'm an Irishman. I should be a good golfer. Um, I always think it in terms of like, everyone has their own, their own environment, their own family. Cost to me is when you're, I really do try and strive for that work-life balance first and foremost, right? I kind of divide my days into, I've got my Monday through Friday, and then I try and spend at least half my weekend into something at work. And then the rest is kind of family time. But just talking about the work side of it, think about any project you're going to undertake. The problem is, where we want to be builders, we want to be doers. So you tend to just dive straight in, right? You're just diving straight into a project. And from a data science mindset, it's a very research-focused discipline. And that's a bit of a trap, because I've seen data scientists quickly go to, okay, I'm going to do a pilot project here. I'm going to spend 3 or 4 days just gathering some data, see what I can find out about it, and kind of take a bit of an undisciplined approach to it. And that's why a lot of data science and AI projects fail, because people think, they underestimate the amount of cleaning, the amount of modeling, the amount of feature engineering you have to do as well. So one approach I always do is kind of do, even if it's a back of the envelope thing, like, why am I undertaking this? What's the outcome? So starting with outcomes, starting with goals first, right? And again, I'm not saying like put this in a formula or something like that. It's just that if I'm going to, like, let's say for ODSC, we're trying to figure out, like, I'm very passionate about a topic called machine learning engineering, and I'm talking to the speaker committee about it, machine learning safety, autonomous vehicles, crashing, all that stuff. Is it worth pursuing that? I do a little bit of initial research to see, what's going on out there and stuff like that. Before I would start getting other people involved and doing scraping, I would try and say, well, really, why do I want to do this? Is it because I want to do it, or is it going to have value in my community? So sometimes I want to do it for the sake of doing it myself, which can be an awesome goal. Other times, like, this is really for my work or for ODSC or something like that. And is it for really a personal goal, or is it for the outcomes, I think? So I think being honest with yourself as to why you want to pursue certain things is interesting. And it's also an interesting discipline, because I'm surprised about how few people do that. And I'm the same way when people ask me to do stuff. So, I'm basically self-employed, but I work with a team. We all collaborate together. And if I'm going to ask someone to do something for me, I got to be damn sure that I'm going to use what they do for me. And I kind of apply the same discipline. So when people ask me of stuff, right? So when Ken G asked me to do an interview on the show, and I said, Ken, you're awesome. Of course I will. And I would love to talk to your audience. So, you do that quick mental map, but it's surprising me how often we commit to doing stuff subconsciously. And then all of a sudden we feel overwhelmed. Right. So prioritizing is a key part of that. Yeah.
I really like that. I think my view there was a little too reductionist. I mean, what you just described is that a lot of different things, there's different reasons for doing them. There isn't, I was taking that purely math mindset. Everything is broken down into utils. And I think in life, that is, we can't have those oversimplifications. So, I agree. I think that there's something really important about scoping and estimating correctly and evaluating the value to you up front. Something that I have always been trying to get better at, and something I personally struggle with, is properly estimating my own time and improving at that meta skill. How have you been able to develop that? Or, how do you, is it just reps, or is there just, how do you get good at that?
reps. There's only so many times you can count to 12 in your life, right? My trainer told me that once, and I was stunned. I was silent for 5 minutes, which is an achievement in itself. I think, how have I been able to achieve that? I think, it's been very important. Sorry, Ken, can you repeat the question? Because I just had a COVID cloud fog.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So I think the question is, how do you get better at estimating your work, or how long things will take, or evaluating things along those lines? I think that's something a lot of data scientists struggle with, is that, oh, I'm doing this EDA on this new data. I can't possibly estimate that because I haven't seen the data yet. I haven't done XYZ yet. And that's sort of this pitfall that a lot of people fall into. Whereas I think I've seen some data scientists are like, yeah, it'll take me roughly XYZ time, and they nail it every single time. And it gets me so frustrated because I struggle with that so much.
Yeah. So that's an interesting question, because I think, to make the obvious answer, it depends on experience, right? So again, I'm a big fan of the agile method. And if you're people are listening to this, like, I think a lot of times we focus on, data science as a discipline in and of itself. So if you're a beginning data scientist listening to this podcast, I would definitely encourage you study the agile method, right? And study what a Scrum Master does. It'll literally take you an hour or two. So I love the Scrum discipline of crowdsourcing estimation, right? So you get with your colleagues, you get with the team, and they tell you from that aspect. And that starts to give you a sense, because it's like you got a friend who's always late and they will think they're always on time, right? So that will tell you if you're an overestimator, an underestimator, or spot on, right? So getting feedback from other people and understanding where you kind of fit within this thing is very, very important. So I think the number one there is know thyself, right? And you're not going to know yourself unless other people are telling you, right? And I've seen, even outside of Scrum, that discipline, you can actually do this with your boss or your colleague. If the boss comes back and tells you how long it's going to do this, you can kind of make that as part of a conversation, because especially early in your career under pressure, like you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't know how long it's going to take. It's going to take 3 days. It's going to take 5 days. So first of all, giving yourself a range is good, but having a conversation with someone who's asking you out of something about how long it's going to take 3 or 5 days. I'm not saying you say to your boss, he's like, hey, Seamus, how long is it going to take? Well, John, how long do you think it's going to take? that's not a good career strategy. So, those are some very, very basic tricks there. And then it always comes down to, I know people overuse this, but it's known knowns and known unknowns, right? In software engineering, one of the reasons I stopped doing it got boring. Like, I pretty much could tell this project is going to take X number of back-end engineering, X number of software architecture, X number of front-end, and all that kind of stuff. Data science is a much, much different discipline. So what we tend to do there is, instead of like making a big bet, this is going to take 6 months, we usually say, I'm going to take 1 week to do data exploration, data profiling, things like that. And then I'll deliver next stage of project. So I think another tip for your audience is not to get hemmed into a commitment that you've no idea you're making, right? Let's say you're working as a consultant where they want to award a contract for you. That's even more difficult than being the boss. So understanding that there's research aspects to data science where there's lots of unknowns, that is a research project, not a deliverable project. So that's a key part of understanding that aspect. Like, someone may say to you, I want you to build a data science app, and you may know the software engineering part pretty well, but you can still say, well, that's a research part, and that will require a certain amount of time to do that. So for the last 10 years, I've been doing a lot of consulting, and usually people are always pressuring you, like, tell me how much this is going to cost, Seamus. How much time is it? A 2-month project, a 3-month project, 6-month project? What I tell them is, I said, give me a small amount of money, or don't give me any money, and I'll spend 1 or 2 weeks, and I'll probably save you $500,000. Because by doing 1 or 2 weeks of research, you can save a lot of time, and make sure that you don't set up a project for failure. And we've done that multiple times. And it still amazes me to this day that instead of spending $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000 for a week or two, I'm not trying to give away my rates or anything, for a project that could cost like hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're like, no, we just need a time estimate because we've got a budget and stuff like that. So people are not good. They're not trained to do this, and they're not good at doing it because they're asked to do making reasonable estimations. And that can be a trap. You should be very, very wary, especially in your early career, right? Because once that word comes out of your mouth, like, I can do this in 2 months, and then you're going to be in misery for the next 6 months while you try and finish the damn project. And
I love that.
Yeah. So,
well, I think 2 things come to mind when you bring that up. And the first is I think it's the Parkinson's principle. So it's generally the task that you have expands to fill the amount of time that you give it. And,
absolutely.
I had sort of this light bulb moment when you were talking there, where it's like, well, if I say that I'm going to do 2 weeks of exploratory analysis, right? Like, I can do just 2 weeks of analysis. If I know that that's a constraint, I'll get X amount done. If I had 3 weeks, maybe right, I could do more. But, have you ever seen those maybe it's because I watch a lot of YouTube, but there's a video where an artist, they have 10 seconds to draw a picture. They have like a minute, and then they have 10 minutes they draw the same picture, and you get like the varying like level of detail and whatever it is. And to me, it's the same thing with a lot of this work, is that, if you spend less time, the quality is going to be a little bit worse, but you're still getting some sense, some feeling of what it is, and you can always expand it further if you want later. Go ahead.
But I'll tell you a funny story about that, because I had a manager who asked me for that once, consulting gig in finance. And the guy's like, well, you only got a day or two, so figure out what we can do in a day. And I came back with a linear chart. He's like, what the hell kind of a model is that? I said, it's a linear model. He said, well, you want something in a day? I didn't have exactly time to train a data set and build a neural net. So there you go. So it's kind of like your 1 minute sketch there.
Oh, I love that. A real world example.
Yeah. When all else fails, linear algebra is your friend. Simple log chart. But anyway, sorry, I digressed, but I couldn't help myself.
No, well, so I think what you're describing also with scoping projects.
Ken, if you're listening, so it was another Ken who gave that to me. So Ken, if you're out there listening, that was you I'm talking about.
I love that. Something that you described with the challenges of project estimation, that's something I see at a macro level with large companies too, right? I think a lot of organizations, they spend a lot of money building out data science teams, and then they didn't know what the data science teams were supposed to do. And so they treated them like other teams. Like, in a year, we're expecting these types of results. And I would say that probably the majority of large organizations that just hire data science teams without a roadmap, those teams significantly underperformed, largely because of the scoping and the planning, because they were looking for ROI when they had to do a lot of preliminary research to even like test to see if any of the projects they were working on were worthwhile. So it's funny how something at a micro level, like we're talking about, really expands and is highly visible at the highest level in these big organizations. And it's a little scary and kind of, I wouldn't say sad, but it's interesting to see how much that specific problem has cost a lot of companies.
Yeah, and there's some very high profile examples of that, and even in the last couple of months. But I will tell your audience, if they're listening, if you're thinking about becoming a data scientist or machine learning engineer, and you hate math, and you're a crap coder, and you just like staring at a computer and coding is just pure torture, but you want to be a data scientist, I've got a much easier route for you. Just go study project management and be a citizen data science, be a data science enthusiast. But there is a massive need for AI project managers, machine learning project managers, data science project managers. I don't care what you call them, but it's exactly that. At the end of the day, software engineering is about building rules-based systems, and rules-based systems are very predictable. You gather a set of requirements, which translate into a set of rules, and then you build your platform around that rules, and that's very easy to project manage. And then you want to add new features. You have a new set of rules. With data science, you exactly said it. That discipline of being a project manager, being a data science manager is much, much different, because think about all the stakeholders you have to involve. You could be dealing with the C-suite, you could be dealing with the product team, you could be dealing with the engineering team, the data teams. They need to understand the different set of criteria around a data science and machine learning project that requires a certain amount of research, a certain amount of unknowns. And I've even seen companies who've done it well. They may start off as a low stakes research project. Then all of a sudden, because the research project was successful, they think now we're going to commit to, let's say, just give to protect the guilty. We'll give just a vague example. So let's say you're a banking company, and I've actually done a project like this. You're working on a new credit card approval system, and you're running some models and trying to do it and improve certain things. And the pilot project works great, but it's not ruled out. It's a pilot project for a limited number of uses. And then all of a sudden, like, hey, we know how to build this. We've done it. Now we're going to build a production version of this. Like, production version is much, much different than, kind of research type project, because now you've got a much stronger discipline applied to it. And the risks are much larger, right? You're making commitments, you're bringing in cross-disciplinary teams who may not be familiar with this, with data science and machine learning. And the fuzziness that goes on around it. So I think that's a great career choice for a lot of people, is kind of getting into management role in data science and AI without necessarily being a technical data science or AI manager himself, AI professional themselves. So it's a big problem, which presents a lot of opportunity.
I love that. Someone I had on the show before, Greg Kukio, he does a role like that at Amazon, and he gets to work on all of these cool things, and he doesn't have to have the headache of writing a lot of the code. I actually even took a project management role. It's called a business consultant in analytics. So I'd interface between the business stakeholders and the teams without having to directly manage the projects. And then eventually I moved into a product owner role, which is the best of both worlds. You get to effectively see the results of a lot of these projects, be in these conversations around the strategy around them, but you don't always necessarily have to do the hands-on work. I will say I actually like the hands-on work, and that's why I stopped, right? Is because sometimes dealing with people, as much as I like talking with people, I don't like necessarily telling them what to do and disagreeing with them all the time. This is a lot more amicable. I got to talk about and like enjoy the process of talking with other people rather than it being as competitive.
Yeah, but I will tell your listeners what's fascinating though is as you kind of alluded to there, like there's so much going on in the space right now, and people again keep focusing on, I'm going to use TensorFlow, PyTorch, I'm going to use Python, but think about all the things happening around responsible AI, right? Privacy, trust and explainability, observability, right? Responsible AI. And then think about something that we're focusing a lot on ODSCs, like machine learning safety. I'm kind of fascinated by this subject. Maybe we're too early, but you're looking at things, who's got control over autonomous systems, whether that's civilian, military, or whatever role. How do we run models that are ensure we got privacy across multiple systems? Like so many projects are using data scraped from the web. How do we know there's not poisoning attacks in those data sources? So what's fascinating about these new roles is even if you're not necessarily hands-on, you get to deal with all these fascinating concepts that people didn't even come along 2 years ago. If someone told me like 5 years ago, oh yeah, by the way, they're going to be able to poison your data science, machine learning projects with data that they put in place in the web like 2 years ago, I would have been like, what are you talking about? So some of the stuff coming down the pike is fascinating. So when you're dealing with a business, like you got to be very cognizant of stuff. Your business may, bias in AI, facial recognition, like you pretty much got to assume all your data you're collecting is bias, because there's no such thing as the perfect universal set of data, right? You got to how do you explain explainability, observability to your business? How do you explain model risks? What can go wrong? What are the known risks and the unknown risks? So, the engineers, it's kind of like in software engineering, you have the developers, they give birth to this beautiful thing. This is a software program. Then you have these QA people come in and try to kill it, right? So we need more of that in data science and software engineering. We need people, hacking at these models, poking holes in them, seeing all the ways they can break. And there's so much tougher to break than traditional software, but they do, right? So that to me is why I kind of get passionate about this, because there's just so much coming down. Like it's the universe of opportunity and challenges within data science and AI. It's like the universe we're occupying right now. It just keeps expanding at a rapid pace.
This episode of Ken's Nearest Neighbors is brought to you by Z by HP. HP's high compute, workstation grade line of products and solutions. Z is specifically made for high performance data science solutions, and I personally use the ZBook Studio and the Z4 workstation. I really love that the Z line can come standard with Linux, and they also can be configured with the data science software stack. With the software stack, you can get right into the work of doing data science on day one without the overhead of having to completely reconfigure your new machine. Now back to our show.
Well, that's such an important point, is that these data science models, the systems and the checks are not as readily in place as a lot of the software products that go out. I mean, I think about some of the work that I've done, and in some of those times, I was the only data scientist working on the project. Right? There was maybe people were doing code review, but there wasn't a second set of eyes necessarily making sure that the assumptions in my model were correct, making sure that the assumptions on the data were correct, a lot of these types of things. And to me, that's a really necessary step as we move more towards these massive production models that have massive implications, as well as, even if it's a third party team or another team within the organization, just vetting a lot of the information or models that go out. That's a really valuable thing that I'm not seeing done at scale as much as I think it should be. I mean, I think a lot of the problem is that in the largest organizations, it absolutely is, the really tech forward companies. But if you look at it, the majority of data science is probably not being done at those organizations, right? And there's only so many. And so we're probably missing a lot of oversight with a lot of models that go out because, that's just not standard practice in every organization today.
Yeah, so I agree 100%, but I will say there's a tidal wave of solutions coming for that, and pretty much everyone's putting it under the MLOps umbrella. So MLOps is a big tent, right? And so MLOps, machine learning workflow, anywhere from your data generation, data capture, all the way to continuous integration, continuous deployment of model, to looking at model deprecation, adversarial attacks on models, stuff like that. So a lot of stuff is falling under MLOps, but I think the industry is making a slight mistake there. Like, if you look at the number of startups right now, I think 50% of startups in the AI ML space that came out in the last couple of years are actually in the MLOps. Well, I disagree. I think 25% were in the MLOps space, and the other 25% are pivoting into it. So, like, I don't know any company out there doesn't want to be MLOps. So that's good news, right? But they're all focusing it from a workflow standpoint and trying to throw in ML safety, machine learning safety under that. I predict machine learning safety is going to be as big as MLOps in a couple of years, because that's, again, they all have to be integrated, of course, but they're two hugely important topics, and they're both big umbrella things. Because we just did a blog for our blog site the other day where myself and Alex wrote this blog on responsible AI toolkits in open source, right? There's the IBM 360 toolkit. There's TensorFlow's got some bolt-ons to their platform as well. But you can kind of see like the open source community is slowly waking up to this, because you look at the number of stars, number of downloads, it's not that great. SHAP and Lime have been out for a long time, explainability and observability, but it doesn't have the same kind of numbers like TensorFlow does. So the community is starting to slowly embrace it, but I think that's going to be a hockey stick growth, because I still think a lot of companies are still in the exploratory stage, or they're using very simple, well-known models, right? Basic random forest, logistic regression. Those models work pretty good. If you're Zillow, maybe they're not working so good, but sorry, Zillow, I just couldn't put that in.
That's all right. I'm probably never getting a job there after the video I made, so I'm not worried about it. Well, I think it's really interesting how that's integrated and the adoption over time. So to me, a lot of these things are technology solutions to human problems, right? Like ethics is a human problem, not technically a technology problem, right? Right. What TensorFlow and a lot of these other packages are doing, they're solving technology problems, right? And bridging that gap between technology solutions to human problems from technology solutions to technical problems is something that I think does take time, and there's lag and there's lack of understanding. But I also think that the solution to any of the issues that you described are going to be more technology solutions, right? It's a Pandora's box thing, right? We've already unleashed this technology. We're not putting it back in the box. What we're going to have to do is create even better technology to monitor it, or to make sure it's more ethical by our standards and things along those lines. So it's sort of a really interesting problem that we see and that we face. And I'm excited to see what comes out of it. I know it's a little bit outside of my technical understanding a lot of the time, but it's fascinating, at least for me, to read about and try to conceptualize.
Well, I will make a bold prediction here. I think I've only done this once or twice before, so people can hold me to it. But when stuff blows up, metaphorically speaking, of course, when stuff blows up, only then do people pay attention. And you know, you can see with my gray hairs, I'm aging myself a bit here, but you know, you experience like this pandemic we're going through right now. This is like a monumental experience for a lot of people. But prior to that, the Great Recession, as they call it in the US, or the collapse of the financial markets, right? That was a huge deal. The dot-com bust. All of these are kind of seminal moments in technology and societies, that's right. So when the financial markets collapsed, they realized quite quickly they didn't know what the hell was going on in the financial markets. They had it regulated, they had a control system around it. They didn't really know what's going on. And it's kind of funny what you're saying about, you know, a lot of reasons these models blew up is everyone was chasing the same model. Like you get a couple of PhDs working in financial markets. PhDs are very hard to come by, groupthink. They thought they were modeling the right things. And if you look at the history of the financial market implosion around, you know, tranching bonds and stuff like that, it was based off one guy's model, and he only used 10 years worth of data. And based on his model, the stock markets, the housing market never collapsed, and it absolutely wasn't his fault, but people took his model verbatim. So my prediction is it's not just a technology problem, it's a societal problem, and it's definitely a business problem. So if you look at regulated businesses, take finance and healthcare, for example, they have a whole industry built around compliance, right? Even construction, you have to have compliance, so buildings don't collapse and people don't die. I think people have been predicting this for years, and it still hasn't happened, but there needs to be more of an understanding of what's going on in the AI industry. Because look at it, what's going on with, I'm not going to name names, but look what's going on in big tech, right? And the issues and the lawsuits that keep coming out of there. At some point, we need to understand that there is a lot of risk involved in this, and you need to build systems. Companies need to build systems similar to compliance, right? So no matter what kind of rules you do as a government or society around this stuff, companies really have to be at the forefront of doing that, right? So I think that's going to be big business for a lot of companies. I think it's going to be a great career opportunity for a lot of companies. And then when that opportunity comes, it's going to come overnight, right? So when the financial markets collapsed, there was an obscure job called chief risk officer. No one cared about you. No one talked to you. They did talk to you. They wouldn't listen to you. And then that became the hottest job in finance by far. So I think you're going to see something similar in the AI space. And that hasn't come yet because, I don't know, you can read all the polls and surveys you want, but I would guess like only of the companies that say they're doing AI, I would say only about 25% are really applying, you know, kind of cutting edge modules as opposed to very simple models. And the rest they're keeping it in a safe space, a safe bubble, right? They're not willing to apply core business strategy to AI yet, right? So, you know, yeah, look at Netflix and Amazon, right? Their business is built on a recommendation model, but it's still not fundamental. If their recommendation model collapsed tomorrow, they'd still be in business, you know what I mean? Because Netflix recommendation model to me is like, what the heck? I'm just, the best model they have is like what everyone else is watching, which is not a model, which is basically just analytics, right?
Yeah, well, they do say, I forget what, I read an article recently. They believe that their model is worth over $1 billion a year to them, their recommendation system alone, which I think is fascinating. Which, and I also find a little bit surprising. But you know, the question is, how much would a model that like you or I could create be worth to them, right? Is it something that is like what is the difference between what they do and like the next step down? Like, you know, yeah, what you know, from ground zero, maybe it's worth that much, but compared to another reasonable model, probably isn't that great a difference, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, that's very true. But that's why I like recommendation models, because at the end of the day, the key's in the name. It's a recommendation. It's not a binary model, right?
Exactly.
Like you'd be pretty pissed off if Netflix, if they gave you one movie to watch. It's like you turn on Netflix. We know you so well. Here's our recommendation. So you're going to watch Emily in Paris, 5 episodes straight, and nothing else.
Yeah.
which I wouldn't mind because I got to catch up on my viewing, but you know what I mean.
I
So
know.
I'm talking more about, because think about financial markets or healthcare, right? Financial markets. I'm either going to bet 50 million or not going to bet 50 million. I'm either going to allow this trade or not allow this trade, or I'm either going to tend to this patient to have cancer or not have cancer, right? So this is what I mean by as we progress into this, as the stakes get higher, this stuff is going to become very, very important very, very quickly. And I don't think it's, I guess my main point and my prediction was it's not going to matter until it really matters.
I see. Well, it's funny you should say that. So I'm reading this book right now. It's called The Changing Principles of Dealing with the Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. And
oh, very good. Yeah, that's on my list. Send it
awesome.
to me when you're done with it.
Yeah, I will. I'll bring it with me, and when I see you next, I'll drop it off.
Or let's get Ray in the show and we'll pepper him with questions.
There we go.
Better.
That would be sweet.
Wouldn't it?
But the book, it talks about how like cyclical the financial markets have been over time, and it's significantly more at a macro scale predictable than a lot of us realize. And so I think that's something, basically, like, big things happen around war. War is relatively predictable based on inequality within country and other geopolitical forces. And essentially every 75, 100 years, we have these new world orders that are created based on essentially everything blowing up and going to scratch. And then there are all these new opportunities and all these new revolutions or whatever that come about. And I think that maps really well to what you're describing, is that essentially when everything hits the fan, that's effectively when there's all these opportunities to reorganize and to create new industries or new roles or new positions or new companies. And, the challenge is generally pretty hard to predict those things that we haven't had a lot of history with, but it's also something that I think is I don't know if it's necessarily a ground truth, but it's something that in my short time around on the planet, I've seen a lot of truth to.
No, that's an awesome point, and I think your listeners should kind of take that to heart, because one of my favorite sayings I say to myself when stuff just kind of collapses and falls to the ground is when one door closes, multiple other doors open, right? So I had a consultancy up until about 2018, and ODSC was going from an expensive hobby to something I had to run full time. We've an amazing team there, Avora, Vimal, Anna, tons of other people working at ODSC. So it's been amazing to work with them. And, we just got really bad timing. Like we just hit our stride in 2019. And then, St. Patrick's Day, thanks in Boston, they shut down all the bars, and then like COVID started. And all of a sudden, like overnight, it was just turned off. And I've had 3 or 4 moments in that in my life. I was in London working for a hedge fund, and the guy who's head of the hedge fund called me up and said, Seamus, we're shutting the whole thing down because the financial markets collapsed. Before that, I was in college. I had a job, and I was going across in the red line, and then the dot-com bubble burst, and the job I was supposed to take was gone. So it's just like, yeah, when shit happens, it tends to happen to you, because that's what makes it global, right? It affects a lot of people. So you got to learn to roll with the punches, number one. But I really, really believe, like, when one door closes, many other doors open, because remember, it's opportunity cost. So it doesn't matter if you fail to get into that university, you get fired from a job, or you don't get the job you wanted, or you don't get the promotion you wanted. It's like, it's really up to you, because to me, it's a mental state. So when that door closes, it's been closed on you, right? Because I'm sure a lot of your listeners are like me, but I like to beat a door down. But you can only bounce off a door so many times, or get slammed in your face. So to me, that's always been a great lesson, and I've really taken that to heart. So a great example is, I always try and surround myself with a great team of people, because I know when opportunity strikes, you don't know when it's going to strike, number one. And when the tough gets going, when things get tough, you need a really good team of people who are passionate around you. So doesn't mean doesn't matter if you've hired these people yourself or their colleagues. It's really important. Whatever you do is just surround yourself with that kind of a team. And I'll give you a great example. So COVID shut us all down, but from April 2020 until where we, January, February 2022, we built our own virtual hosting platform for hosting our virtual conferences, built our own from scratch. Like a startup couldn't do that in a year. In addition to that, we built an online virtual training platform called AI Plus Training. In addition to that, we built a career matching platform called AI Plus Careers. So there was fourth thing as well. I can't remember how many projects we did, but these are all machine learning projects. We built them with teams of people, and it wasn't just me. It was this awesome team of people. Like I said, Lavora, Vimal, Anna, Irene, Ira. I could name them all day, but everyone got behind these different projects. We got them all running at once. They were super passionate about them, and they've used an opportunity. So, like, don't be kind of depressed that shit happens. It's kind of like, I like to invest in the stock market. I always tell my friends, I'm like, you got to have dry powder. I'm waiting for this shit to hit the fan. So, because then you've got opportunities, right? And that's when working in finance taught me, is that you have to be patient. The opportunity will come, and you just have to be ready for it. So it doesn't matter if that's in life, looking for the perfect partner, I guess. Be ready. I don't know. In work, but stuff like that. So a lot of people are very myopic, like, this sucks. Why does it happen to me? Like, when the pandemic hit, just a personal story as well. I'm like, I can sit there and be fat. I'm going to go run my, so I was like, I set myself a personal goal, which I failed to do, but I'm like, I'm going to lose 10 pounds while this pandemic, I'm going to go outside with my mask on and go for a run every day. So you can let events control you, or you can take an opportunity of events. And that's a really important life lesson. It took me a long time to learn that. But I do have a stubborn streak, but that's played well to my advantage. Like, and I'm also a super optimist. Like, you can't be a business person without being super optimistic, but being an optimist is a qualification to be an entrepreneur, but it can also be your biggest weakness, right? Because you have to be optimistic. You have to believe in yourself and your team and what you're building, but then life will come along and smack you around in the face. And then, you got to, at the same time, when those punches land, you got to figure out, like, you got to have a plan to pick yourself up. So I know I went on there a bit, but I think what Ray's talking about is like, this stuff is coming. And I think everyone can learn from the pandemic and what stuff went on prior and how you're going to deal with that. Because, I'm always thinking of myself, not negatively, but I'm like, what's coming next?
Yeah. Oh, I like that so much. And, something that you said in there is really important to realize. And to me, you described patience, but you also described proactivity, right? So there's one thing to be patient and wait for things to happen. And there's one thing to be patient and slowly preparing for things to happen, which is the category that you fall into. I think something that people like us, people that are optimistic, people that view themselves as entrepreneurial, are always trying to do is that they struggle to sit still. They want to be working towards something. They want to be building something, or they want to be doing X, Y, Z. And I don't think that conflicts with patience. I think that it means that your proactivity is focused on preparing for something. And then inevitably the patience is waiting for the right moment for it to actually happen and to get in and to create the opportunities.
Yeah, because like you, I talk to a lot of people who are just starting out their careers, and my heart goes out to them, because I can tell that they don't quite understand the advice I'm giving them, because like a lot of people who want to be in the data science field or want to get to the next level, they're already working a job, right? I don't know, you could be flipping burgers, you could be working as a data analyst, you could be working as a marketing person, and you're trying to convince your boss or your company to put you into a data science role, right? Or you're interviewing with other data science, no one's giving you a chance. So what I say to that, like pretty much everything I transitioned into, no one gave me a conference to run. I had to go out and find good people, find a good team. No one told me I could work in quant finance. No one told me I could be a programmer. Like, you have to work towards those yourself. And then you have to have the patience to give yourself time to build up the skill and have the perseverance to do that. Because, I hear people when I'm doing my own, we do a kind of a career lab as well. And they're like, Seamus, I've talked to 50 companies. I'm a data analyst. No one give me a break as a data scientist. But I think there's an element of I have to do this and I have to do this now, because I believe everyone's on a different timeline. Some people can get there quicker than others, but you got to keep chipping away, chipping away to break that down. And it will, if you have the patience and perseverance, it will come. Because sometimes it's about finding the right strategy, right? What you're in, stuff like that. So that's kind of key to it. That's a big piece of it.
I really like that. I think that at least I found the opportunities come to you if you're starting to create them. And that gave me a really interesting way to view opportunity cost, right? So if I don't land a job and then I just sit on the couch, the opportunity cost of me missing that job is virtually nothing, right? I mean, I'm giving up nothing by missing that job. On the other hand, if I don't land a job and I'm still pursuing different things and I'm working on my portfolio, maybe I even try to start a company or do whatever, the opportunity cost of taking that job, right, is in theory infinite. It's sort of like a Pascal's wager type of thing, where it's like, I'm not a very religious person, but I think that the idea is interesting, where it's like, if the rewards for believing in something are infinite, right? If there's infinite upside, even if there's an infinitesimally small chance that that the event happens, you should still pursue that event, because the expected value is infinite, right? And I think there's a lot of value associated with that in the job search, is that, okay, I didn't land this one position, but I have infinite opportunities out there if I still pursue, if I'm still moving forward, if I'm still building on what I have already. And I don't know, I find that unbelievably powerful. So, as we're coming to the end here, something I really want to touch on is how you built ODSC. Like what's the origin story? How did you build it to where it is now? Obviously, I spoke at one of the more recent ones and I had a great time. What did that progression look like for you?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I know there's a simple answer, but I'm going to fail to give it. That was, as you said at the very start, a bit of an awakening, and a lot of luck and a lot of collaboration. I think I mentioned earlier how I went to this meetup, and that was an epiphany for me, right? So I came from a background where, when you're doing consulting, when you're working in finance and places like that, you're really not allowed to talk about your work. And I really, really love this whole idea of, like, I can go to a meetup, this person is going to share their story, share their learning, share with an audience. I didn't have to pay for it. I'm not being pitched anything. I'm not being sold anything. I'm there just to learn. So I love that concept. So I started the Boston data science meetup, and I was giving a few talks myself, like yourself, giving a talk, a lot of work. And I'm like, you know what? It's much easier. I'm going to invite people to come talk, right? So I started inviting people to come talk, and then I realized, yeah, this is awesome. Like, I get to meet wonderful people like yourself. I get to learn about what they're working on. I get to meet other people who are interested in what they're learning about, work about. So kind of snowballed from there. And then I got together with a bunch of, meetup is very collaborative. Like, a lot of people think meetup competes with each other, but it's very collaborative. So we started to do this thing called the Boston Data Festival back in 2012, 2013. We 4 or 5 meetups together. We had stuff going on all over Boston in the evening. Bag, board, steal, different event space. And then, as I said before, I've always known that when I'm working in a startup, advising a startup, it's team. I know that people are sick of hearing that, but I'm like, I really want to do this. But to do it successfully, I want to do it globally. I want to do it on a scale that will be of interest to people. So I was talking to a few friends, and I met this guy, Mohammed Mahmoudi, who was running these early morning discos in New York. Those things they were in New York, they were a big fad for a while. Pre-COVID, you go there and you dance from, from 8 o'clock in the morning till 10. I forget what they were called, but he was running these things. So I'm like, okay, I'm a data scientist. Mamet's a great party organizer. I want this stuff to be fun because I'm going to these dodgy conferences. I'm like, Mamet, let's start a conference. He's like, all right, Seamus, let's do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's like, how big is your party budget? No, but he was my first kind of hire in that, and he was unbelievable. He was fantastic. And then from there, we started hiring. really good, passionate people because, you know, to me, it's a dream job. We get to reach out to some of the most interesting, exciting people in the world of data science and AI, right? To other people, like if you're not in data science and AI, you're like, oh my God, this is so boring. Like, why do I have to email this person and stuff like that? So we've had a ton of fun building a team of people who are really passionate about the whole concept of running a conference. And, you know, and to be part of that team, like you kind of have to, it's, you know, I build software and I love people using software. But as an entrepreneur, I had a restaurant business back in Ireland like a decade ago as well. And what I used to love on a Friday afternoon, the place to be packed, would be like 200 people in there. They're all having a good time. People are getting drunk. They're getting happy. You know, they're with loved ones. And it's kind of the same with a conference, right? You've got like back in 2019, now it's not like that. You have 5,000 or 6,000 people all chatting, all connecting. And it's an unbelievable sensation, excuse me, to know that you made that happen, that you brought all these people together. And, you know, it's a really good kind of like shared team collective, like, you know, as a team, you know, you execute on this because it's 1,000 points of minutia, right? So it's like a Premier League soccer game, rugby game, whatever your sport is, American football game, where you spend all this time as a team practicing, and you go out there and you deliver the perfect game. All right, you know, it's ODSC. We usually have a few little fumbles in there, but
well, you know, I think the 1,000 little points of minutia is really beautiful thing is that what I've learned from the past couple of years, especially creating content, is that people are what make any of these businesses successful, right? Like even data science, where we're coding and doing all this stuff, at the end of the day, the goal is to improve value in some human's life, right? At a microscopic level. And the more people that I meet, the more opportunities that I find are presenting themselves, whether it's to speak, whether it's business, whether it's just like making friends, whatever it might be. I am a firm believer now that all of the value, all of this stuff is pointing towards building a community or improving the community you're a part of.
Yeah.
And I really like that overarching message. I mean, it's brought me significantly more happiness. It's also brought me some financial benefit over the last couple of years as well. And I'm excited to see or to speak with someone who shares that sort of that idea that the collective is very powerful.
And I will tell people who are like, you know, you're tired of your job, you're bored of your job, you're sick of your job. You know, you got to value your work time, you got to value your home time. But if you follow your passion, maybe it's not even data science, but if you follow your passion, it'll reward you on multiple levels because of, you know, success, as you were saying earlier, Ken, it's not just about monetary reward because, you know, success is you get to a point in your career because you're passionate about it and people know you're passionate about it. You get to a point in your career where you can work with awesome people that are as passionate as you about something. It just makes life just so much bloody more fun and enjoyable. You know what I mean? And that's a key part of work-life balance because if your work life is sucking the life out of you, like that's affecting your home life, right? That's affecting your personal life. And if you're working with people that you love working with, you love collaborating with, you love creating with, it doesn't matter what field you're in.
It's not work.
Yeah. And, you know, early in my career, I didn't value that. I didn't value that enough. And now I would take less money for a better team hand over fist because, you know, life is too short. And if you follow that, but what's interesting though, I think if you follow that road, the success will, you know, the work-life balance will work out. And you just have a richer life in general.
Incredible. I think that's a perfect place to end. Seamus, thank you so much. I enjoyed this. Always a pleasure talking to you. One thing, how can people learn more about yourself, more about ODSC, any of those things? What's the best place to find out more?
Oh yeah, loads there. So want to reach out to me, the best place is LinkedIn, or you can email me at Seamus. That's Seamus with an H, by the way, SHEAMUS@ODSC.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you want to attend ODSC anytime ever, just go onto the website. We've got a free expo. There's also a career lab. So we have lots of speakers, much more qualified than myself, talking about data science careers. Ken G, your fabulous host here, actually spoke at that event in San Francisco last year, so you can access that for free. So ODSC has got lots of free stuff going on. If you're interested in our careers platform, you can go to aiplus.careers. We have a free career lab there and all that good stuff as well. So yeah, and just sign up for the ODSC newsletter, and then you'll get information about all this stuff we're doing. You'll get more than enough. You can, after a couple of weeks, you'll be hitting the unsubscribe button. You're like, this is enough.
I'm supposed to say that. But I'll link all of those things in the description below. So you'll have a link to Seamus's LinkedIn and ODSC. Again, I had a great time speaking there. I'm so happy that you could come on the show, and I can't wait till we talk again.
Ken, as always, man, great talking to you. Love your energy, love your show. So we shall chat again.